Hello, everyone. Do you want to speak English fluently? Please stop studying boring grammar rules in books. It is difficult and you get tired. There is a better way. You can learn naturally just by listening to stories. Relax your mind, close your eyes, and let the English enter your brain. Tonight, you will learn with the story of a simple school teacher who became the most dangerous man.
Walter White was a man defined by his potential, not by his reality. He was a brilliant chemist, a genius who once contributed to research that won a Nobel Prize. But somewhere along the road of life, he took a wrong turn. Now, at 50 years old, he was not a famous scientist or a rich CEO. He was an overqualified high school chemistry teacher in Albuquerque, New Mexico. His life was a series of small humiliations. In the classroom, his students ignored him. They texted on their phones while he passionately explained the beauty of chemical reactions. To them, he was just background noise. But the humiliation did not end at school. Because his salary was too low to support his pregnant wife Skylar and his disabled son Walter Jr., he had to work a second job. He worked at a car wash. The harsh chemical smell of soap and wax was the only chemistry he practiced now. One afternoon, he found himself scrubbing the tires of a luxury car belonging to one of his own rude students. The student laughed. Walter looked down, swallowing his pride. He felt invisible, like a ghost in his own life. He was a good man. He followed the rules. He waited at red lights. He paid his taxes. He never took risks. And yet, he felt like the universe was punishing him for his obedience. He was asleep, walking through a nightmare of mediocrity.
The catalyst for his transformation arrived on a cold, sterile afternoon. It started with a cough that wouldn't go away. Then came the doctor's office. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The doctor, a man younger than Walter, looked at the x-rays with a grim expression. "Inoperable lung cancer," the doctor said. 2 years, maybe less. For most people, a death sentence brings fear, but for Walter, it brought something else. It brought a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in 50 years, he had nothing to lose. The fear of failure, the fear of judgment, the fear of the future, it all evaporated. Driving home through the desert landscape, Walter gripped the steering wheel. He calculated the numbers in his head. His family would be left with nothing but debt. His son would struggle. His unborn daughter would never know him. The good man had failed. It was time for a different man to take control. The sleeping dragon inside him opened its eyes. Desperation led him to Jesse Pinkman. Jesse was a former student, a young man who had failed Walter's chemistry class, but graduated in the street pharmacy business. They were an unlikely pair, the disciplined, intellectual teacher and the chaotic, street-smart dropout. They purchased an old beige recreational vehicle, an RV, to serve as a mobile laboratory. They drove it deep into the New Mexico desert, far away from civilization. The landscape was vast, empty, and silent. It was the perfect place to create something illegal. Walter applied his scientific genius to the process. He didn't just want to make drugs, he wanted to make art. He understood the purity of the elements. He respected the chemistry. The result was a product unlike anything the criminal world had ever seen. It was glass-grade pure, and it had a signature color, blue. The first time they sold the Blue Sky product, the money didn't just trickle in, it poured. Walter held the stack of cash in his hands. It was more money than he earned in a year of teaching. It felt heavy. It felt dirty, but more than anything, it felt powerful. For a man who had felt powerless his entire life, this sensation was addictive. To protect his identity, Walter created an alter ego. He shaved his head, not just because of the chemotherapy, but as a symbol of his new self. He put on a black pork pie hat and dark sunglasses. He adopted a pseudonym, Heisenberg. Walter White was afraid of danger. Heisenberg was the danger. Walter White was a victim. Heisenberg was a predator. His double life became a complex web of lies. He lied to Schuyler about his long absences. "I'm going for a walk," he would say, while hiding a bag of money in the air vents. He lied to his brother-in-law, Hank, a DEA agent who was obsessed with catching the new drug lord. The irony was thick. The man Hank was hunting was sitting across from him at family barbecues, passing him a beer. As the months passed, the teacher began to fade, and the criminal took over. Walter started to justify his actions. "I am doing this for my family," he repeated like a mantra. "I need $737,000, then I am out." But it was a lie he told himself. The target number was reached and passed, but he did not stop. The empire was growing, and he was the emperor. The business brought him into contact with dangerous men. Tuco, a violent psychopath. Gus Fring, a cold, calculating businessman who hid his criminal empire behind a chain of chicken restaurants called Los Pollos Hermanos. Walter learned to navigate this underworld. He survived explosions, shootouts, and threats. He became colder, harder. One night, Schuyler, who had discovered his secret, was terrified. She begged him to go to the police. She thought he was in danger of being murdered. "Walt, please," she cried. "If you are in danger, we have to stop." Walter looked at her with eyes that lacked empathy. He was offended by the idea that he was a victim. "I am not in danger, Schuyler," he growled. "I am the danger. A guy opens his door and gets shot, and you think that of me? No, I am the one who knocks." It was the moment the transformation was complete. Mr. White was dead. Only Heisenberg remained. He had defeated his enemies not with muscles, but with his mind. He had outsmarted everyone. He felt invincible. But history teaches us that all empires fall. The higher you build, the harder you crash. Walter's ambition became his destruction. His pride, his hubris, alienated everyone he loved. Jesse, his partner, turned against him. Schuyler looked at him with hatred, not love. And finally, the truth came out. Hank discovered who Heisenberg really was. The revelation destroyed the family. In a tragic confrontation in the desert, the same desert where it all began, Walter lost his money, and he lost his family. Hank was killed. Walter's son refused to speak to him. Walter had to flee. He escaped to a lonely cabin in New Hampshire, surrounded by snow and silence. He had a barrel full of millions of dollars, but he couldn't spend a cent. He was the richest man in the world, and the poorest. He had achieved his goal of providing for his family, but he had destroyed the family in the process. He was a king with no kingdom. In the end, Walter White returned home for one last mission. He was weak, thin, and dying, but his mind was still sharp. He secured the money for his son. He saved Jesse from his captors. And finally, he visited Schuyler. For years, he had said, "I did it for the family." Schuyler stopped him. "If I have to hear one more time that you did this for the family—" "I did it for me," Walter admitted, finally speaking the truth. "I liked it. I was good at it. And I was really alive." Walter White died on the floor of a chemistry lab, bleeding from a wound, but with a slight smile on his face. He died surrounded by the only thing he truly loved, his work. The police sirens wailed in the distance, but he didn't hear them. He was at peace. The reaction was complete. What can we learn from the chemistry teacher? Perhaps that inside every quiet person there is a desire to be great, or perhaps that every action has a reaction. Walter White wanted to control his life, but in the end, chemistry and fate controlled him.